Namaste to all of you. Welcome back to the Fourth Niyama podcast. Join me as I continue my conversation with Dr. Rajvi Mehta. In this episode, we explore the Guru-shishya tradition and why it is critical for a yoga teacher to fully incorporate the principle of non-duality from yoga into their life. Could we have ambitions and goals when it comes to our yoga practice? What makes for a good teacher and what makes a good student? How does a teacher know that he or she is good at what they're doing? How should we understand the instructions in Iyengar Yoga? These questions and more will be addressed in this episode with Rajvi Ji. May what you listen to here give you encouragement and direction in your yoga practice. There is another aspect of your work which is quite fascinating for me. You're a doctor and a scientist, and you have a background in microbiology and IVF. So can you share more about this aspect of your work and what do you do exactly? And how has this work given you a different perspective on Iyengar Yoga? And maybe how has Iyengar Yoga affected the work that you do as a doctor?
Basically, I'm not a clinical doctor. I have done my doctorate in reproductive biology. So I did my master's in microbiology in Mumbai, and then I registered for, I got a fellowship to do my PhD in reproductive biology, and just chance or luck that I started in the field of human IVF when it was just introduced in India. So I was doing my PhD, and my mentor was part of the first IVF program in India. So I learned a lot of things by the by, and later started working in the field as an embryologist. So initially I was more into basic research. Then I went into clinical embryology, but the training of basic research remains. So as an embryologist, you're creating embryos in vitro, you're doing in vitro fertilization, etc., till creating embryos and transfer. And now I'm more into teaching and training, working with two organizations as a consultant through academic and training aspects. Now, the fact is that because of science, your thinking becomes very rational. You know, it's science is more exacting. So you become more logical, you become more rational, you learn to ask questions and, deduce answers. So that, I think, possibly makes me more articulate. Possibly, I don't know whether I am. And secondly, like when I was writing my thesis, my mentor would question every word. So you became very cautious of every extra word you wrote. Is there having meaning? So that developed your clarity of writing and speaking, which reflected and possibly helped me later when I started doing yoga rahasya, because you became cautious of every word. And that's when I noticed that when you were editing Guruji's work, it was already very precise. So he had that exacting thing when he was even speaking, forget writing, very exacting. So you're sort of you become a little objective-minded. You become, more rational. You want like abstract things. There are, but it's different. You ideate, etc. When it came from yoga to here, a doctorate work is generally very demanding. We often tease that it's free labor in the lab, doctoral students. But you realize that the stresses which others felt, you didn't feel. So that I can possibly attribute to the practice of yoga. You don't feel that stressed, you don't feel that pressure, And even today now, when I'm in a position to talk to a lot of youngsters, we are trying to emphasize on the work of the health of an embryologist. And I have even contributed chapters to IVF textbook, talking of health of an embryologist, and at least few things from yoga incorporate, because they sit on a microscope, and you're working on a microscope, can never be straight. You're not going to rest, have a backrest. You're bending forward 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. And sometimes there was no break. I remember there were 2-3 years when there was not even a Sunday off, no Diwali, because patients are on. So you need something. So because of the practice of yoga, you could balance out. So I remember in my early days when the cases would be on a Sunday, I would insist that I would do the work before 7 o'clock because I had a class. Then go to the Guru Yoga class, come back and do the rest of the work. And the doctor who was with me, very senior doctor, she was cooperative. So we would go at 5 in the morning, do the work, 7 to 9, attend class and go back. So we had half a day. Otherwise, the work would start at 10, we would be there. So we did a lot of learning and you realized that it sort of brought you a lot of sanity. And today I ask all the youngsters, even I try to tell them simple things. It's not yoga, but at least do some postural work so that you don't have problems later on. You know, because there's a lot of burnout which is happening in the medical profession. And here it's a new profession and it is a strain. So in fact, in some survey which was done in Spain, they found that at least 70% of the embryologists, and they're not very much in the older age group, 30s or so, are suffering from severe back pain, neck pain. So emotional stressors, because the outcome is dependent. And imagine that if somebody makes a mistake, it's a disaster. I mean, eggs look similar, embryos look similar. If there is a mismatch, it's a disaster. So these errors can happen. And, for that, we need to have a very quiet, calm state of mind because there's a pressure of time. You have to do things in a specific time period. And these stressors can impact either the skilled work or there could be errors. So people use now mechanical means. You have devices for witnessing, electronic stuff. But still, finally, I think you need to have a balanced state of mind so you don't land up. So I think it has helped me. The subjectivity and experiential aspect of yoga has helped me in science, made me less objective. Objectivity has helped me, I feel, and I may not be right, it's my perception, to be more clear in my expressions. So I think that's how both seem to have helped each other. Sometimes there has been a desire that if we can have, research studies to document Guruji's work. I mean, today the whole world is doing it. That is enough. Why do you need to prove anything? You don't need to prove that Iyengar Yoga helps back pain. I think every person who's practiced for 2-3 years knows that it helps, knows what to do, for common things. But I do feel that, today yoga is so popular. A lot of things happen in the name of yoga. People make a lot of claims. And for Guruji's work to be known and sustained, maybe we need to do some objective research studies. However, I must admit that having been trained into that, I haven't done as much as I would like to. Sometimes it's doing too many things and not getting down to it. But we have done a few, like we have spent about 14, 15 years working with patients with Parkinson's. We have got studies presented at international neuroscience conferences. I mean, I don't see much value in presenting it at yoga conferences. Yes, that's nice to share with the teachers so they can replicate it. But I don't need validation. The yoga teachers and students don't need validation. They have trust in the subject. That's why they're students. But to the scientific community. So yes, then during the pandemic, we did some study where we were looking at a group of doctors of modern medicine, not the Ayurvedic doctors. And we gave them yoga classes online for a span of 3 to 4 months. And we assessed them on various scales and how it had impacted them. So there also you could see. The big thing was to me that there was only one dropout in the study group. Normally, any kind of study, a 30% dropout is acceptable because, for some reason. And our control group had many more dropouts, while the control had nothing to do but fill up the forms, but we couldn't convince them. So that just shows that, the subject did impact them. So yes, there's lots that still needs to be done. When you wear the yoga hat, you wonder what is the need, and that's what most yoga teachers would feel, that the science is much older than the modern scientific methods of assessment. What do you need to prove? I mean, when there are millions and millions practicing in all corners of the world, do you need to do a study with 30, 40 people and prove it? Yeah, they're right in their way. But when I'm in their science hat, I feel, yes, it needs to be documented, put on paper, so that non-practitioners also have confidence in it. And you can confidently say that if a person comes with this, so I'm mainly talking of, say, disease conditions now. If they come with this condition, yes, this many percentage of people would benefit. And this is what exactly to do. Because none of us would have that depth of intuitive abilities with Guruji Gitaji had. So we are dependent on what has been documented. So that way, I do feel that it would help. And also a lot of things, when it happens that people say yoga does this, people question the scientific fraternity questions, because very often yoga teachers do claim, quote unquote, we can cure everything. So, does it really? Is it just by chance? Is it that 5 people you handled improve? And have they really improved? They feel good, which is very good. But has there been an actual improvement? Objective improvement in the symptoms? What level? How long did it last? So, these are the questions which need to be answered. So that's one hand. And yes, it would be fascinating to understand the mechanisms by which this transformation has taken place, which is, in a way, a pretty high level of science. What exactly is happening in the brain? Why do we feel the way we do after practice? Things like that. So that's a different level of practice, different level of science. You need instrumentation, you need a collaboration. But yes, if somebody is doing it, that would be. But when people come to us, I feel it's not ethical to ask them to undergo assessments, invasive assessments, or undergo MRIs or etc., because they've come to us for yoga. We can't ask them to pay for that. But yes, we can do a subjective assessment of their actual feeling. It doesn't cost them. But at least you have some level of documentation. And then you can speak more confidently, not within the fraternity, but outside the fraternity. Otherwise, it comes under the thing, or so-and-so said it. It becomes tales. So that's important. And then we have exactly what we're doing. So there's lots to be done. Yes.
Has Guruji ever encouraged any of his students to do this kind of scientific research and
He always encouraged.
Yeah.
He was always encouraged. He would say, that's your subject. Tell people. He was open to assessment. I remember there was an ophthalmologist of a very big institute in India, Shankar Netralaya. It's a very famous, big Chennai-based hospital related to eye issues. They wanted to study glaucoma and eye pressure in inverted poses. And Guruji was ready to be there. So there were a group of volunteers, maybe 15, 20, I think. Like Guruji was one of them. And they measured the eye pressure. And they found that it did go up while going up. But I think it did go up in Guruji. And then when you stayed, it came back to the baseline. And so they did this. So he was always open to anything, to any kind of experimentation, study. He would say, go ahead, do it. And I mean, we do have over 100 plus research papers on Iyengar Yoga from all over the world. And most of them would be done by outsiders, as I would say. Not done by the Yoga Institute. Yoga Institute, whichever part contributed the teacher or the yoga, but they may not have played an act. It's not their study, their design. So they were outsiders who were assessing. And he would say it's third party, which is more validated than me assessing myself. And I'm talking of these are research papers in peer-reviewed scientific journals. Because publishing a paper in a yoga journal, to me, is not that high value for this work. That is meant for the reach of people. Yoga, it is meant for people to know, to give them confidence or teach them. But when you're thinking of scientific validity, and that is a viewpoint, whether we need it or not. I mean, most of the teachers may feel we don't need it. But yes, I guess with the background, I feel it helps. I don't need it. I don't need it while I'm teaching. I don't need it for myself. But yes, if I want to talk to the non-yoga community, I think it helps. It gives it more weightage.
My next question is about Guru and the Shishya phenomenon. So back in Guruji's use, we know that Guru-shishya tradition mattered for progress of the student, and it mattered a lot. Today, this tradition is understood by a very limited circle of people, and generally a lot about personal growth has been commercialized today globally. So Gurukul tradition is less appreciated. How do you see this as a phenomenon, and what would be your guidance to senior yoga practitioners on finding their path forward? And what would be your guidance to the teachers on how to find a way to help their students and serve them in their progress?
First, I don't think I'm qualified enough to give guidance, but I can give my views. First is that the Guru-shishya parampara would mean that you're learning not only during the lessons or the classes or the discourses, but there's a lot of learning beyond. And people like us who have sort of, I would say, grown up with Guruji, there was a lot of learning that happened without teaching. His behavior. Like when we got a little older, he would accompany, sometimes the seniors would take Guruji out for dinner. We would go along. And there was a lot of learning that happened there, very silently from his behavior. So if you think back and say, did he teach you? No. But the way he was. So this thing comes, and also, we would have, sometimes he would say, chalo, camp. We would have a camp, and you would go to Lonavala for 2-3 days. And then you realized many things. So if you ask specifically, it's very difficult. Simple thing, now props. Now, we never had all those props. But how we will be innovative, use anything. Today, we'll say, if you're going for a class, you have this tool bag, you need 2 breaks, 1 blanket, blah, 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 blah. There was a lot of innovativeness. How he would join everybody for food. Although he ate little, he wouldn't isolate himself, that, go and lock himself. He was very transparent, and he could be very transparent and open because he was not a dual person. There was no duality. There was not a face for the students and another face what he really was. So he was what he was. And that is the biggest thing, because the purpose of yoga is non-duality. To become one. So you saw that. And that's when I said earlier, the closer you got to him, the more you were respectful towards him. Because you saw there was so much more, to that simplicity. So there was a lot of learning that happened. Today also, there is a lot of learning that happens in class, outside of class when you are. So we do encourage some kind of, in Mumbai, a kind of a yoga camp where we just go together, where in class your teachers, outside class your colleagues, fellow practitioners. So those kind of things. We travel, say, to Pune, we travel to Vellore, wherever. So yes, that is one. Second thing is, we shouldn't see, that's my viewpoint, that we take up yoga because we want to make it a profession. I very strongly believe that the simplicity that Guruji Gitaji Prashantji have is very difficult. And especially to youngsters, that I would say, that you take to yoga and say, I want to become a yoga teacher. I want to become a yoga teacher. So when that's your goal, that's your livelihood. Just now one may be very, say that this is my passion, I want to do this. But when you see other people, you may be influenced. And that's where you don't start commercializing. You start with the love of the subject. But as life progresses, your requirements, responsibilities change. And you need finances. And then you may get influenced by others. You may have taken the path of yoga, somebody has taken the path of commerce or business. You may feel, and then you feel, okay, I should earn more. So practice decreases, more time goes into teaching, private tuitions. So that balance gets lost. So I would always say that, especially when you're young, have another source of livelihood, then you don't really worry about commercialization. Because you'll continue doing it. Whatever you're doing, you have another source of income. So that's my viewpoint. Then that commercialization comes down, because something else is there to keep you going. So it balances you out, and that yoga helps you in whatever you're doing. So whether you are a teacher or you are whatever you are, business, whatever you're doing, it sort of balances you out. So I would say that. Also, let's not encourage people to, because when you can teach and you have a depth of teaching, students will come to you. But when that depth goes, you have to attract students. So when you want to attract students, what's the best way? I give you something in return. And that's where all this teacher training certification starts. And I'm not talking of Iyengar Yoga per se, because here you are at least 5 to 7 years into practice before you even think. But otherwise, so what do you do? Okay, I'll give you a livelihood. So, we must be receiving so many emails and calls. I want to be a yoga teacher. So I said, are you a student of yoga? No. How can you teach? How can you even think of teaching? I may say I want to be a surgeon. So can I attend a surgery course? I want to be a teacher of surgery. Don't I need to study medicine, then surgery, then be a teacher? How can I decide what I want to teach? So you need to be a student first. Know whether the subject interests you. Know whether you have the aptitude. So I think we shouldn't encourage such things, although it is enticing. And as students, we should, our teachers, as I said, you may be teaching and having another vocation, profession, whatever. Don't get carried away by what the students say. Because students are, if they knew the subject, they wouldn't be your students. So yes, obviously you feel good when somebody appreciates you or they do what you've asked them to do, but don't let it influence you. Yeah, that's a joy. Take it, but don't make it a baggage, because then your ego develops. You start thinking you're great. You start thinking you're on a pedestal, and that's the beginning of it. So that's there. Also, when you first start teaching, that's a danger area. Because till then you're a student, you're listening, and you're doing. Moment you become a teacher, and it may be one class, you're on a pedestal, you're on a platform. People are listening to you. And what you're doing is you're just a messenger of your Guru's teachings. But you are a courier person. You haven't made that product, but it gets to you that I'm somebody great. And that's where, again, the beginning of the end. So if somebody has a knee problem and, minor, whatever, it's Supta Padangushtas. It's given to you. You know what? Because it's so easily available. So you do Supta Padangusha and you do Uttitasta Padangushtas, and the person feels good. And the person tells you, oh, I've been to so many doctors, it didn't help. And you start thinking you're bigger than those, which is not true. It's somebody else's knowledge. You are just a courier. So, you have to realize every time, come down, get grounded. So in our case, we were fortunate that so many of us were together. So there was no chance. So I feel maybe it goes to your head. But yes, so that I think is very important. So then you will be more grounded and not be carried away. So if you're grounded, because finally the ultimate aim of yoga is to also convert the capital I into a small I to a dot. So that can happen only with. So as practitioners, as teachers, that's what Prashantji keeps saying. Iyengar Yoga teachers have become very arrogant. Guruji has himself said, one of my first teachers may still be better than the others because the system is so precise. He's made it so easy, so precise, so clear, with all the advices, the books. You follow it. Even if you follow Lighthall Yoga, you can still be a good teacher at the beginner's level. But one should realize that that's just the beginning. So I think if one takes care of that, we may not be carried away and, learn that what he's done and what he's done. We've got it ready-made, and at least stick to the purity of it. So when we start doing stunts, I would call it, for sort of, you know what I'm trying to say is that you start creating your fan base, creating. a fan base happening is different. But so I don't think we should fall trapped to all these things. Especially today, it's very easy to get entrapped into all these things. And we should realize that finally, why did one start yoga? And I would say at least majority, till 10 years ago, I would definitely say did not start yoga to become teachers. They may have come out of curiosity or a health issue, or some friend is doing it, or family is doing it, and you've got into it with no motive of making that the vocation of your life. You started. So as long as that remains and ambition doesn't take over, there will be growth. But more ambition takes over, then we'll get to a goal, but no growth. So you'll reach your goal, and then again what? So something else. So then the purpose of yoga may be lost. And that's what I presume. So it depends what one is looking at. And yes, I think so for us, it was just very natural. So I remember once asking Guruji about ambition. Ambition, would you be demotivated? Would you not want to do anything? He says, no, you need to have only one first ambition, a first goal. Okay, I want to start yoga. Say it is that, or it could be anything. It gives you something, like you may not even articulate, something that keeps you going. Then just continue and see where it leads to. So he made it very simple, like he did many things. Just continue and just keep observing and absorbing whatever you get. So it's not like a goal, achieving a pose, achieving X number of students, achieving X, Y, Z, because then you're running after it. But if you're practicing, whatever you're observing, so there's much more introspection, much more reflection. And much more joy. Possibly that's what he meant when he said menu and called him his best violin teacher. It just showed that it got out the best in you, whether it was your analytical brain or your emotional brain, your sensitivity, your perceptivity, everything, all the best came out. So you become better in whatever you do, and you're comparing with your own self.
So is there a place for a teacher to ask himself or herself, am I a good teacher? And
I don't think we should bother, because when you're saying, am I good or bad, it's judgmental. And good compared to what? I mean, you may find me good, Y may not find me good, or vice versa. So I don't think, it's just teaching what you know, teaching what you have experienced. And maybe if you're not able to communicate that experience, maybe your method of teaching has to alter. And method of teaching involves words, it was demonstrations, corrections, visualizations, analogies. There are many methods, all combined together. So if you're not able to get it, then you have to step back and teach in another way. So teaching would not be just instructional. The teaching is that the message has to go. And the message will go when you are able to connect to the student. So that's why I always say there are no instructors in Iyengar. Instruction is one way. You speak, whatever happens on the other side, you're not involved. But a teacher speaks after seeing the student. Your initial may not be, but there's a continuous silent dialogue between the teacher and the student. And that's why you start with a small group. Then it can become large. So you still need to communicate with each and every one, although you may not be physically seeing them. You're not touching them. But you should be able to have a two-way dialogue. And the student has to be fully absorbed, not because of force or fear. All that is there in the beginning. You inculcate discipline, say you have to be on time. But if you are a teacher which inspires, students will be there. Of course, and you can't be rigid, because they're humans. They may have problems, personal. So we also have to be compassionate about that too. So we have to be sensitive. I can't be a very rigid teacher, so you have to be on time. Somebody has somebody sick at home. They're delayed. So if you're going to be rigid, at least I'll say at least they got whatever time they had in class. They couldn't attend 1.5 hours. They could do half 1 hour. If there is a genuine reason. But if you know that, okay, this person, it's ritual, it's a practice, then yes, you will be harsh. So, one has to develop that, see through that. So it's not strict in the external sense. You have to inculcate with time. At least
So,
that's what I think.
what makes, in your opinion, for a good student, and what, from your experience, what challenges a student should be alert to?
See, I don't think there are good students and not good students, but everybody is good to a certain extent. You see, people are not coming to any of the classes by force. Unlike, say, if you're in an academic school, you have to go to school whether you like it or not. And I believe that is the situation all over the world. Some places, a minuscule amount may say, oh, child, you don't want to go to school, it's okay. But majority, it is convention that a child goes to school, whether you like it or not. In this case, most people come out of choice. Okay, the purposes may vary. Some people may have been forced into it by their elders, say a second generation. But they are coming because the first generation felt that is something my children should get. Say, in my case, or Jawar's case, or others of our family. So that's different. So nobody has come, so they've come as a student. Now it's for the teacher to mold the student. So a good teacher is not, to me, is the one who can go to the level of the student and talk in their language, make them understand, get them involved, and then they will evolve. So students' levels raises, teachers' level raises. There's no point if the students is in kindergarten and the teacher talks to a PhD level. The teacher is very good, no doubt, but you need to go to that level. So the malleability of the teacher to go to all levels, and the student, because anybody who's a student, I think every student is a good student. The fact they have taken the effort to come, they're good students. So it is, I don't think it's for the teacher to make the student good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's much more responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike, and in schools, it's more challenging, I would say, because there are students who don't want to come, have not come out of choice, and to get them interested. And if you recollect, I mean, most children like a subject if they like a teacher, especially in childhood. What subject you like, the teacher they like, that subject they like. Unless there are serious difficulties with a subject. But in general, it is associated with the teacher. So here too, we have to go to the level, because anybody joining in is like a kindergarten student. They don't know anything. So you have to first make it interesting at their level, not tell them how great yoga is. Oh, yoga does this. No, at their level, let them get interested. So children, if you are teaching, you want it fun, then they will continue. They're not coming to you for philosophy. If you go to a teenager, that's the time you have to understand them. Then you have to challenge them silently, because a teenager doesn't like failure. Body is not supporting them. So, you will have to be very cautious, because they are at crossroads. If you challenge them and they feel humiliated in public, they'll go away. A child will laugh it out, but a 16-year-old may not laugh it out. They will feel humiliated, they'll walk out, or they will not continue. They may not walk out, but they will not. So how to handle them is different. Then as they get older, then yes, a beginner will be fascinated by the postures. They're able to do, oh, I can balance in Shirshasana. But that is a small phase. Then you have to get them to the sensitivity. Then comes, so that you get to the senses. Then you come to the mind. So it's constant evolution. So as long as people are getting it, they continue. Why did people be with Guruji for 60 years? Not to just say they were associated with him, not to say that I studied with him. Who knew? So that's how it is. So I guess it's a constant evolution in different parts, because as one is aging also, there are changes. So how to handle that? There's so much in the subject. So I think like I feel that all students are good. The fact that they've taken an effort to come to you, they're good.
It's true. I want to bring for the next question a little bit of a context. So I've learned about your journey to Kutch after the earthquake in 2001. And it was a very fascinating story. I was amazed with the courage you came there with, and also the generosity of Guruji, how much he donated, and even including his clothes, I think it was in the story. So it was obviously a very tragic situation and a challenging situation for the people of that region and generally for the country, I believe. And today the cataclysm keep happening all over the globe, like geopolitical, ecological crises. What is your guidance to a yoga practitioner on how to use their practice to maintain the balance of mind, to serve themselves and to serve others?
When we went to Kutch, it was, I think a lot of things were incidental. A lot of things were also because of hyper enthusiasm. So actually what had happened was that somebody contacted us from the Aga Khan Foundation, and they said, would you like to help out? And in times like this, everybody wants to help out. So we thought they would be looking for cash or things in kind. And they said, we have enough, we want yoga. Now, that was very challenging because none of us had seen this level of trauma or this level of disaster. People would have experienced maybe a little bit of personal trauma, but not of this magnitude. And Guruji gave us a lot of guidance. And it was practical, very practical hints. Be one with them, get them to open the sides of the eyes. Don't ask them to close the eyes. A lot of practical hints on what to teach. And, we're going to a terrain, and it did help them a lot. But just soon after, so this was on January 26th, we went there from Feb end to March end. We went for 6 weeks, so it must be Feb end to middle of March. And then same year, 9/11 happened in the US, in New York. And I remember writing to a couple of our New York teachers, just inquiring whether they were safe. And they said if there's some practice, because there's a lot of fear. So I spoke to Guruji, because what was meant for Kutch, they were not practitioners. Secondly, we had limited supports or props, and we didn't even have walls or stuff. So Guruji gave a special sequence of practice, which was shared. And I think even today, people are utilizing that, which sort of became a trauma sequence. But, inverted poses, what to do, not closing the eyes and things like that in cases of extreme trauma. And of course, one has to see the situation. But I think practitioners, I know that Israel is doing a lot of work in this, and they're really working with the soldiers and stuff. I'm sure it's happening in different places because most teachers would be, wherever there is problem, would like to give whatever practices to get some kind of calmness in the uncalm surroundings or very stressful surroundings. So I think it's personal practice and just sharing whatever we know. I mean, we all who have been practicing for a while know from our own practices, not just from information, how inverted poses help. How forward, but forward not in all conditions. Because if one is depressed, then it may not be helpful. So, say a Purvattanasana, a Setubandh Sarvangasana, a chair Sarvangasana, Guru-shishya would help in overcoming anxiety. And of course, depending on the level and age and other factors concerned. So these kind of practices can help. Sometimes even standing poses with support, give some internal strength. So one has to read the situation and do. But yes, sometimes like Guruji has said that it's peace within your nation, the body can bring peace within nations. So a lot of turmoil can be existing. But even if we can help a small group around us, there will be a ripple effect, and hopefully it will spread with the numbers that we are. And maybe whatever little sanity we can, maybe not to the whole big world, but to our surroundings and maybe their surroundings. Because that seems the only peacekeeper as of now. So that's what we will need to do. What else can we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Coming to the closure, as you know, this project is called the Fourth Niyama, which is a reference to Patanjali Yoga Sutras, specifically to Svadhyaya. So what is the Fourth Niyama for you? What is Svadhyaya for you? And how critical for the student it is to understand this aspect?
I think every aspect, anything that you do, is a kind of study. So sometimes, more often than not, we may be doing activities without getting involved. So Guruji said yoga is complete awareness in whatever we do. And I'm sure most of us are not consistently aware of what we do. A lot of things happen in a mechanistic mode. A lot of things may happen in a reflective mode, just a reactionary mode. Some may be reflective. So I guess at least practice time is the time where there may be some level of reflection, observations, explorations, you see the connections. And we are very lucky as teachers, very, very fortunate that you can experiment that on the students in a way, quote unquote, and check whether that is being transmitted. And then when you have a group of students and you say it's transmitted in this group, this people, but not in this. I'm able to get these people to do it, but I'm not able to get these people to do it. Then you observe these groups. What is so typical about person A who is able to comprehend and implement what I say? What is different of this person? So you may see it in their body structures. Then how do I bring B's body structure to A? And that's how there's a continuous learning. So the students are teaching you. Because what you learn is only for yourself, but through that. So there's a constant, I would say, learning. And then maybe you reflect by listening or reading to Guruji or recollecting, like people like us have that other third dimension where you may recollect what he has said. And then it makes sense to you now. Maybe at that time, you listened to it, but you didn't hear it. You didn't understand it. You understood it maybe superficially. Now you feel it's deeper, and maybe a few years down the line, you may feel even this is superficial. There's something still deeper. So I guess that's a constant dialogue or observation, reflection. That to me is possibly what you're calling the fourth niyama.
Thank you, Rajvi.
Yeah.
It was a great privilege and pleasure to talk to you. This was Rajvi Mehta. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.